lot with, lot widths of over 100 feet in both directions. Also in the commercial plan development, there are existing buildings on the site, as we said, the Mini Cooper dealership and the BMW dealership, and each of these buildings that already exist, and there is no proposed development to these buildings. As they exist today, they will meet all the setback requirements for the commercial plan development zone. If I thought this might be a question, that there's a 10-foot requirement here and a 40-foot, that's based on the height of the buildings. That's why those requirements are different. But again, they both meet and exceed the required setbacks once these, if you approve the proposed subdivision. Again, there's no development on site, and as the site currently exists, they have adequate parking, and the land division will not impact that parking. Both sites will continue to have adequate parking to exceed the requirements in the code for both parking and loading, and any proposed future uses are going to be evaluated by the planning department to make sure that there's adequate parking on site for any possible proposed use. Finally, the proposed land division was reviewed in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act, the state's CEQA guidelines, and the city's environmental guidelines, and has been determined to be categorically exempt under Class 15 for minor land divisions. It meets this because the proposed project would result in division of one parcel into two parcels in an urbanized area zoned for commercial uses. Both lots would be in conformance with the general plan and the zoning. There are no variances required for either lot. The properties are adequately served by utilities and public streets. The site hasn't been subject to a land division in the last 2 years, and it doesn't have a slope greater than 20%. Therefore, no additional review is required. And as of 5 p.m. this evening, the city did receive, and I believe the commissioners were CC'd on these, 4 letters in support of the project, and we received no letters opposed to the project. Therefore, staff is recommending adoption of the resolution approving LD 552, subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The action of the Planning Commission is final unless an appeal is filed within 10 days of the date of their action, and that ends my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the Commission for staff?
I have just one question. Looking at the map division, the way it comes down between A and B, Lot A and Lot B, where the driveway is right to the right of the division line at the street?
Over here?
No, the next driveway over.
There's a driveway here, and there is a driveway here.
Okay, so that's not a driveway that we're looking at right
No,
by the line?
No, that is a landscaped area.
Okay. I thought that was a driveway, so no questions then.
Any other questions?
Just one quick, just to confirm that there is only one utility, and that's the sewer that you mentioned, that crosses the between B and A, and everything on B is self-contained except for the sewer lateral. Is that correct?
That is correct. They each have their own water meters, their own electric meters, and the utilities only cross across their property except for that sewer lateral.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Just for
Commissioner Edsel?
the easement, they'll actually draft an easement and get it recorded as a condition of the split, so it'll run with the land.
Yes, it will. It will run with the land, and it'll also be part of the final parcel map that will be required to be approved on the consent calendar for the city council.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? This is a public hearing. I declare the public hearing open. Are there any speakers that desire to have any comment? I have one speaker card from Debbie West. Debbie, are you present?
It's a nonverbal comment card.
Oh, okay. Her comment says she is in support of a Tesla service option in Camarillo. I believe it will be beneficial and progressive economic interest to Camarillo and all of Ventura County, so that's in support. The other letters referenced, there was one from Bob Brown, one from Richard Baldwin, one from Kent Bullard, and one from David Loop, or Lopp. All were in support of the project. Are there any other comments on the project?
Mr. Steve Thomas is here. He's the applicant.
My name is Steve Thomas, and reason we're requesting this partial split is to make way for Tesla. As you know, I have a BMW in this entire parcel, A and B. The lien holder is BMW Financial. BMW Financial did not want to be part of a lease with Tesla. So therefore, we had to split our lots up to make it work. And we're looking forward to having them next door to us. We think they're a great asset for Camarillo, and hopefully they'll do the good job as we have the last 28 years.
Are there any questions of Mr. Thomas, the applicant?
Currently, this is set up just strictly as a lease, not a transfer of the property?
Exactly, it's a lease.
Okay.
Total of 17 years.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one question. Oh,
Yeah. What is the timing of, assuming this moves forward, the timing for?
If everything
Tesla?
goes well, they want to come in by June 1st to start doing remodeling. And we have it pretty well cleaned out, ready to go. All they have to do is come in, and we're just waiting based off the lease basis. And they want to move pretty fast.
okay.
All right, thank you.
That's part of my question as well. You say they're going to come in and do their work on the existing building. By chance, are they painting it any color, or is it staying as is?
I believe their corporate colors are light gray and red, or not bright red, but I've seen the one they had in Santa Barbara, and it's very low-keyed, and it's kind of a light gray. And I haven't seen their, I think maybe Joe might answer that.
I can respond to that.
Director Vaca?
Yes. They are leaving the building as is, with the exception of Mini Cooper had some areas of accent color with the green, yellow, and red trim cap. That's going to be painted the field color of the building, and that's all they're doing.
Will that come back before the planning commission, or is that a director approval?
It's a director, staff, administrative approval.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Thomas? Thank you for coming down tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I know there's a lot of people have mentioned to me for their Teslas, they are really excited.
I wish I was excited as they were, but we have 2 electric vehicles coming out in the next 10 months, so we'll be good.
There you go, that's it. I don't have a Tesla either, so that's okay.
I was surprised that a couple of the letters were people that didn't live in Ventura County that are looking forward to coming down here and bringing their cars down here, so.
Hearing no other, or seeing no other hands and no other cards, I would like to close the public hearing. And I have one last question for, actually, it's for Mr. Thomas. Have you reviewed the changes in the conditions, and do you agree with those? Are you aware of them? Yes. I'm sorry. You mean the changes they have? Yes.
Yes, I've seen their general plan, it's not
Okay, fine. All right, we've heard from the public, we've heard from the applicant, we've had questions. Is there any discussion from the Planning Commission on the proposal?
My comment is I think it's pretty straightforward, and I'm ready to call for resolution unless anybody else has comments.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. It makes total sense to have 2 different parcels for 2 different businesses, and looks like it's well set up.
And I think that the design of the building for the Tesla will work really well with Tesla's brand. I think it's a perfect building for them.
Thank you all. Without playing too much of a pun, the black building is the closest we could come, I think, here in the city to Darth Vader. So in the spirit of May the 4th be with you, thank you. It's a bit of humor. Lighten up, folks. Anyway, are there any other comments by the commission? I would like to entertain a motion for adoption of the resolution.
I believe we had a motion.
Yeah, we'll call for resolution.
Okay,
Second.
I'll read the resolution, number PC 2021-8. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a request from Kinderland LLC, DBA Steve Thomas BMW, for a land division application to subdivide an approximately 6.85 acre lot into two parcels of approximately 4.55 acres, parcel A, and 2.30 acres, parcel B, located at 311 and 411 East Daly Drive in the Commercial Plan Development Zone, further described as LD 552.
I'll make a motion to waive further reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second.
We have a motion moving approval of the resolution, adopting the resolution. Time to vote. Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
I have to say, it's a little strange to be able to push buttons and not raise hands.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7. This is it's a presentation of the draft 2021 to 2029 housing element update. Do we have a staff report?
So Mr. David Moe and Oksana Buck have been working feverishly on this, and they've been doing a great job. And I'm going to turn it over to David Moe to introduce our consultant.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vaca. So our consultant that the city is working with, Rincon Consultants, will make the presentation. Mr. Powers?
Thanks, David. Hi, Joe Power here with Rincon Consultants. As David mentioned, we've been assisting the city with the housing element here over the last year or so. We've been working very closely with another company called Veronica Tam and Associates. Veronica is kind of one of the leading authorities on housing elements in the state. She's worked in communities all over the state for many, many years, so we're very happy to have her on our team. I'm going to kind of run through the policies and programs tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of background, then run through the proposed policies and programs, and then we're going to look for some input from the commission. I do also just want to mention that the folks who know much more the details of this than I do, Greg Martin, our project manager, and Veronica are both on the phone, so they're here for a lifeline in case we need it. As we get into the questions and answers, we can use that phone a friend option. And yeah, again, they know many, many of the details that I may not be familiar with. I know we'll do our best to answer the questions, but we'll bring them in as needed. With that, let's get started. First, are you controlling the slides, David, or oh, I have them right here. There we go. Even easier. Just some quick background first. State, as I'm sure most of you know, state housing law mandates that all jurisdictions periodically update their housing elements. It's really every 8 years at this point. The current housing element, the 2013 to 2021 version, expires this coming October. And so the statutory deadline to adopt this current version, the 6th cycle, is October 15th. And as I already mentioned, Rincon and VTA, Veronica Tam and Associates, are assisting the city. Now, just kind of how we got here tonight, the city has already held a number of meetings. I don't want to go through them all in a lot of detail, but just a quick overview. Starting in last August 27th, we had a first public workshop to introduce this to the community. Subsequently, there was a city council meeting with planning commission attendance to kind of go over what we had heard and kind of the first cut at the land inventory. Then on October 28th, we had another meeting with the city council to introduce the goals and policies and programs and get some preliminary feedback. February 11th was the next public workshop, number 2, where we presented the draft goals, policies, and programs that we'll discuss a little bit later tonight. I got input there. Then there was also a community survey online in February and March of this year. And then on April 14th, a joint planning commission city council meeting where we presented some of the feedback we'd gotten from the earlier public workshop and the community survey. And that brings us to tonight. As again, most of you are probably aware, a key component of the housing element is what's called the regional housing needs assessment and the allocation that the city needs to deal with, and the housing element land inventory that sets out how the city is going to meet that RHNA. The land inventory is really required to identify enough sites to accommodate that regional housing needs assessment, which is ascribed by, it comes down from the state and then through the regional COG, in our case, the Southern California Association of Governments, and every city within SCAG gets an allocation of its fair share of the housing need for the 21 to 29 period. And the city's RHNA, in this case, was 1,376 units. The good news for the city is that all the sites in the draft land inventory are currently zoned appropriately for residential development, so no rezoning of sites is required. And as I'm going to show in just a minute, you have in your inventory about 1,900 units, so a pretty nice buffer beyond the minimum required to meet the RHNA. So here's just a quick overview of the breakdown by category. As you, again, probably know, the RHNA is broken down by various income categories, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And as you can see here, again, the 1,376 is your RHNA, 1,900 is the inventory that we've identified, and as you can see, we have a surplus for each of the income categories. There's just a little bit more information kind of covering the same territory. Again, the key thing being that last line where you see there's a surplus for every income category, but you can also see kind of where we're finding a lot of the sites. You can see a lot of them are actually from entitled and not yet built projects, over 1,000 of the 1,900. But the Camarillo Commons specific plan is a big source. And you can see the other things, Springville, Camarillo, Old Town, and then a number of vacant sites. I also want to mention that we did not include a number of smaller sites that actually could accommodate housing or accessory dwelling unit potential. Those do provide additional potential for housing development that we did not try to get credit for in the inventory, just because we didn't need them, because we met the RHNA without them. Now, the goals and policies and programs are next. The goals, the city has 3 identified in the current housing element, the 2013 to 2021 version. Staff has reviewed these goals, and we agree. We've reviewed them as well, and we agree that they are still relevant and apply. The only real change that we have suggested is the very last part of that goal 3. And that's the part that says to promote housing opportunities for all households. This is really to deal with the fair housing principles that are required by recent changes to state law. So that's just in direct response to some new state requirements. And again, pretty minor wording change, we think, but one we suggest. Next are the draft policies to go along with those 3 goals. There are also 3 policies. Again, these are pretty much carryovers from your existing. We're not suggesting any major changes. The only change that we're talking about is some new language in, again, policy 3, kind of the same issue. That last part about other classes protected by local, state, and federal fair housing laws. So this is, again, about those new requirements related to providing fair housing. Now, we're going to talk about the programs. I'm going to kind of go through most of these pretty quickly because a lot of them are carryover or sort of things that the city is already doing, and then we'll focus a little bit more on a couple of the new things. But a number of the programs, again, just like with the goals and policies, are not new. They're just carryovers from the last round. So I don't want to read all of these to you. You can read them yourselves, but a couple I do want to bring to your attention. Program 2, there have been some changes effective in 2020, through 2025. SB 330, this is about the bonus points in the development control system. SB 330, state law, prohibits the city from implementing the residential development control through 2025, but that sunsets on January 1st, 2025, so that residential control may apply during the second half of this 2021 to 2029 period. And then the other one I just wanted to mention was Program 4, the Fair Housing Practices. Just last week, I believe it was, HCD, the state agency, released its guidelines and a technical memo regarding how to incorporate the fair housing requirements into the housing element. So we think we're still in the process of reviewing those since it just came out. We think that may result in some minor changes to some of the wording and the element, but that kind of remains to be seen over the next few weeks. Okay. Then here are some additional programs, 7 through 12. Again, I don't want to go through all of these. You can read them on the screen. One thing I do want to mention on Program 9, back in November, Council Member Craven requested the City Council Policy 7.09 relating to inclusionary housing be reviewed by the Policy Committee and City Council to ensure this policy is being interpreted and implemented correctly by staff. This will occur over the next several months, but we think that program is still applicable and will remain in the housing element even if there ultimately are some changes to it as a result of that review. I don't think there's anything else I need to cover there at this time, but certainly we can come back if there are questions later. Now, there are also a number of new programs that are new to the housing element, but not really new, but what we're really doing is formalizing things in the element that the city is already doing, and I want to talk about those next. First is Program 13. This is seek grant funding to support affordable housing activities. In this case, the city would apply for grant funding whenever it's available. Sources of funding may include CDBG funds, that's Community Development Block Grant from the federal HUD, or permanent local housing allocation funds from the state HCD. The city is already pursuing that type of funding and has gotten funds already, but so again, it's an ongoing thing, but this is just being formalized now as part of the recommended programs for the new element. Program 14, this is the first time home buyer down payment assistance loans program. As you can see, this provides down payment assistance to households that are selected to purchase an affordable unit through the CDBG program. The city, again, has already received a grant through the PLHA program, that's that permanent local housing allocation I mentioned on the last slide, to support the citywide down payment assistance program for lower end and moderate income households, as you can see. So again, this is something the city is already doing, but it's just now being formalized in the element as a program. Program 15, housing policies. This is just a city council review of each housing policy for internal consistency and for current affordable housing needs, and of course to update the policies as necessary. The city already has 5 existing policies that address affordable housing. The city will be reviewing each of those policies for consistency and for meeting the current affordable housing needs as necessary, and again, updating if appropriate. Now, brand new programs, first state mandated ones, Program 16. These are some zoning ordinance amendments, specifically relating to shelters. And these are specifically aimed at facilitating shelter development and housing for homeless persons, and these are to comply with a number of new state requirements. As you can see there below, there are 4 of them specifically, and I'm going to march through each of them briefly on the next few slides. First is the Low Barrier Navigation Center. This will require cities to allow low barrier navigation centers by right in zones where multifamily and mixed uses are allowed, as you can see. Just so everybody knows, in case we aren't familiar with that term, a low barrier navigation center, that is housing or shelter in which homeless or those at risk of becoming homeless may live temporarily while waiting for permanent housing. So, again, allowed by right, and then the low barrier navigation centers they're service enriched, so they're intended to provide services to help people find affordable, find permanent housing. Next is the emergency and transitional housing per AB 139, and this is basically saying that cities need to allow shelters to accommodate the homeless point and time count. In other words, you need to have adequate shelters in the city to provide for the homeless population that was identified during that point in time count conducted, I want to say one night in January. Cities must calculate the parking for these shelters solely on the number of staff, so not on the number of beds provided. Obviously, some homeless people may have cars, but we are not requiring shelters per state law to provide parking for the actual homeless folks that might be living there, but just for the staff. Next is housing for homeless persons per AB 2162, and this just requires cities to allow supportive housing by right, again, where multifamily and mixed uses are allowed. And then 2020, again, Employee Housing Act is the last one per the Health and Safety Code, section 17021.5. This requires cities to consider farm worker housing with up to 36 beds or 12 units on an agricultural use, and that they be similarly permitted. It also requires cities to consider employee housing for 6 or fewer employees as a single-family residential use. Now, back up. These are new programs. This is one that came up from the Planning Commission, City Council previous input. And so based on that input, staff in coordination with the consultant team came up with this one. We're calling it Program 17, Homeless Strategic Plan. And this involves developing, as its name suggests, a strategic plan for providing emergency and transitional housing to accommodate the homeless in the city, based on that same point in time count that I mentioned previously. And as I mentioned, this is a result of the discussions during the April 14th meeting with the Planning Commission and City Council. So that was what we heard and what we've brought back to you for your consideration. Now, next steps. First, we have most of a draft element ready to go to HCD, we hope. There are some maps that need to be inserted, including the land inventory map and various other maps that we're just finalizing over here over the next couple of days. So those need to be incorporated. Then we will bring the housing element to the City Council on May 26th with any recommendations from tonight's meeting for their review, and we hope that the council will authorize staff to send the housing element to HCD for their review and comment. We're ultimately trying to get this thing certified or approved by HCD before that October 15th deadline. And then we hope to bring the final housing element back to the Planning Commission with any input from HCD incorporated on August 17th of this year or thereabouts. So the staff's recommendation for tonight is to recommend that the City Council direct staff to submit the draft 2021 to 2029 housing element update to HCD for a 60-day preliminary review for compliance with state housing law. With that, we are here for questions. David and I will tackle them as we can, but again, we do have Greg and Veronica on the line as well if we need their assistance. Thanks very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions of either Mr. Martin or staff regarding the update to the housing element? Commissioner Murphy.
Yes, just one question. Is the HCD review, the 60-day review, is that a maximum? Can they take longer than 60 days?
I think that is a maximum. Veronica would be the person who could tell us that with 100% certainty. I'm going to say that is the maximum. I honestly don't have a good feel for whether they usually take that long or if it might be shorter.
Go ahead, Veronica. Joe, you want to, Joe, you want to, actually, each round of the 60-day, each round of HCD review is usually 60 days. They will take absolutely up to the 60 days. At the end of the 60 days, there may still be additional comments that we need to address, and if that is the case, then we may need to initiate a second round of review. HCD typically would expedite the second round, and it wouldn't take 60 days. They have committed about 30 days for the second round of review, if we need it.
All right, thank you, Veronica. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment.
Commissioner
I was
Edsel?
just going to comment, when we had our joint meeting at City Council, I was the one dissenting vote, and I didn't articulate it very well at the time, but it was a change introduced, kind of at the last minute, and I'm kind of one of those guys that like to kind of sleep on it and study it, and so I wasn't prepared to rule on it, and so now that, we've seen it and they've written it up as Program 17 that Tom introduced, I'm fine with it now, and it's good. So I slept on it, considered it, and I think it's a good provision. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Any other comment, question?
I didn't know how far we were going. Sorry. I wasn't sure how much we were going to go through, and I didn't write down a few things individually, just where I saw a few that I wasn't sure where the numbers came from. But as far as the presentation had everything in it. Just little things like on page 22 of 162, 7.2, where it mentions, and this is in 2018, median family income of $111,407. But then when we look at the chart, so I don't know what the date on this one is, on 27 of 162, where for Camarillo it says median household income of $92,913. So I just wasn't sure what the dates are on those, that there's a difference.
I don't know if Greg or Veronica knows the answer. I don't know the answer to that, but that does sound like an inconsistency that we need to address. I think we
Okay.
need to sort that out and be consistent with that number. So I think that's
So,
okay.
and I can maybe address that if you tell me those page numbers again. I think
I heard page 20.
Here, I'll take a stab at it first, Greg. So,
okay, thank you.
Is it just
Commissioner
the
Van der
years?
Meulen, it's comparing the city's median income compared to the county's. So those are two different numbers.
Comparing the city to who?
The county of Ventura as a whole.
I was just looking at Camarillo on, so the 11,000, or 111,000 is the county as a whole?
That's the city of Camarillo. The city of Camarillo has a higher median income than the county's median income.
Okay, but the 92,913 is listed for the city of Camarillo on page 27.
So on 22 and 27, there are different numbers. Okay. Well, I mean, it's certainly something we can look at and rectify if need be.
Since there seems to be a lot that rides on the median incomes
Sure.
for calculations. And,
Yeah, sometimes there are just different sources that have somewhat different numbers, but I think it's certainly better for us to pick one and, and stick with it, absolutely.
I think that was the only thing I had a paperclip marking, so.
So, yeah, we'll take a look at that, and if appropriate, we'll correct one or the other.
Okay. And, yeah, I think that was the main thing. The others were just little comments that I made to myself, just for clarifications.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, I have a few. In the staff report, under environmental review, you indicate that an initial study will be performed and either a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration will be prepared. Does that need to be completed before submission to the state or just sometime later?
No, it'll have to be completed before it's adopted, which we anticipate in August and September of
Okay,
2021.
so it's something that'll be happening in the next few months?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And in fact, it may be better to wait until we get the input from HCD to release that, just in case something changes substantively that we need to address.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're sensitive to the timing. A comment, and I'm looking at page 6 of 13 of the staff report. It talks under Program 3, accessory dwelling units. There's no narrative, or nothing in the narrative, that talks about the density, the texture, and the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people get sensitive to is, oh, an ADU in my neighborhood? Oh, my gosh. But I don't have suggested wording, but I think it's a sensitivity that we should look at, that where ADUs are allowed, that they are compatible with the existing, I'll call it the urban design of that particular neighborhood. If they're small lots, large houses, it doesn't make much sense, but if there's more room in the lot, then it may be more accommodating. So I think we need to be sensitive to the density, the texture, and the character of the surrounding neighborhood when we look at accessory dwelling units. Let's see, in the draft report itself, I have a question. It just, looking at numbers, maybe I got lost, but it's page 7-16 in the draft report. The table is housing by type. And as you go on through, it talks about 2010 units and percent, and 2020 units and percent, and then growth. Under, in particular, mobile homes, it says 1,020 in 2010, 1,020 in 2020, and then growth is 75. Is that 75 units that are going to come sometime later? Or is it certainly not the net difference? And then when you look at the percent of multifamily 5+ units of 47.6%, the narrative above says 44%. So maybe just need to,
Yeah,
maybe just need to take a look at the numbers, that's all.
Sounds like there's a little cleanup that we need to do there, so we can certainly take a look at that
Right.
page and
Yeah.
clean that up as necessary.
Okay, and then table 715, under age of housing stock by tenure, owner occupied a certain number of units, and then 2014 or later, 73, and 2010 to 2013 is 16. And I'm not sure I understand those two numbers. So intuitively, it should be different, because when you start adding, nothing adds up. So if you take a look at those numbers.
Right.
Okay, and that was table 715,
Okay?
right? Just confirming, 7-15.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
And just a general question on page 7-91 of the report, it talks about comparison of development processing fees. And the dollar figure shown, is that just the fee that's charged for an overall development, whether it's 10 units or 100 units or 500 units? Or is that a per unit charge? It's unclear to me. See, a zone change is, for example, $4,873. Conditional use permit is $7,900. Variance is $3,000. Planned unit development is $7,900. And then they say whether they're deposits or fixed fee or whatever. And it's unclear to me if it's a per unit cost or if it's an aggregate total for the project.
So it's a per unit cost, and it kind of says what is in the next column for Camarillo. So if there's
Okay.
a zone change, it's based on the acreage of the property?
Yeah, I happen to be reading the Oxnard numbers, but.
Oh, you're looking at the
they
Oxnard?
all, you
Okay,
know,
yeah.
not that I need you to correct Oxnard, I'm not going to
Yeah,
do that.
okay.
But looking at Camarillo, it's unclear to me whether those costs shown are per unit or per development application.
Okay.
And perhaps a footnote would be
Okay, we can do
appropriate,
that to
just to
clarify
say
it.
what it really means. I don't question the number, I'm wondering what it is.
We'll clarify that, thank you.
And page 7-93, under infrastructure constraints, about the middle of that paragraph, it says, California State University Channel Islands currently produces at its design capacity of 1 million gallons of potable water today. Well, that's a wastewater system, and I don't think it's potable water. So you may want to strike the word potable. Which leads to another general question. Was there any reference back to the urban water management plan that was published by Cam Rosa and the city of Camarillo with respect to water demand factors and how it may affect housing? Did you look at that at all? And the reason I ask the question, we're right on the precipice of a significant drought in the state of California. Right. And all of the urban water management plans have very significant measures for compliance with various conservation and drought measures, and that can have a significant effect on housing, either existing or future.
Yes.
And I don't know whether you want to make a comment in here about that, but that problem is right in front of us, right here, right now, and it's not going to get any better. So,
I would just offer to Chairman Talmadge that we do discuss it generally on the next page, 7-94, and that as a planning tool, it doesn't get into the actual project-specific details of water per unit at this level, but we do reference that the urban water management plan
yeah, because.
would be required,
Yeah,
yes.
right. Very typically, an urban water management plan is based on the general plan and the development plan and pattern of the city, and which makes sense. But I was just wondering, there, of course, there's no mention in here, but I was just curious how that fits, because that's one of your critical utility systems. And with us facing the prospect of a horrible drought, it's something that could affect us. I don't know if you want to make a comment or not.
I mean, it certainly is a consideration that, I mean, as you see, there's a little discussion of infrastructure, and that's required for the housing element to acknowledge that
Right.
there's an infrastructure sufficient to accommodate the housing. So I think you raise a good point. I mean, I think, obviously, we mention it, but I do think it's probably a good idea to, I don't think we need to belabor the point, but a few sentences to
Right.
acknowledge the severity of the current situation, and that may be a constraint to housing and other development moving forward. I think that's
Yeah.
actually a good observation, and I think that would be perfectly fine to incorporate, a brief discussion about that.
So I just want to clarify also that we do have a brief discussion on the next page, page 7-94, we talk about the urban water management plan, and we talk about our local municipal code, chapter 14.12, which is a water conservation ordinance that the city enacted
Right.
and last amended in 2016. And so we do generally discuss the topic. One thing that we want to be careful of is we don't want to necessarily hamstring the plan by outlining impediments to creation of housing, because that's the antithesis of what HCD wants to see.
Yeah, that is true. That's why I wouldn't want to belabor the point. I think a brief acknowledgement would be
Agreed.
fine, but I wouldn't
Brief
go much.
acknowledgement is
I wouldn't
fine.
go much farther than that because of exactly what Joe said. That's going to
right.
start
That's
making
right.
HCD skittish.
You don't want to dig us a hole that we don't need to jump into. That's right.
Exactly.
So I would agree. And you mentioned earlier also about the graphics that on the site inventory. I'm very curious to see those and what they look like. So when those are prepared, are you going to have those ready for the city council?
They will be ready, yes, long before the city council.
Yes, they will. We anticipated having them ready for the planning commission. We apologize for the delay. Our consultant is going to pay the price for this. I'm just kidding. But I do want to, all joking aside, share with the commission that you did see the exhibits and maps associated with the land inventory when we presented that initially. So you did look at those maps, and based on some of the input we received, they're being refined. So they're not necessarily new. The numbers are consistent and a little bit lower than what we had originally presented to the commission and even to the city council. So if you recall that when we originally brought forward the land inventory, we actually had a higher number of units dedicated to the Camarillo Commons area. And based on input, that we should really use a number that is consistent with what would be a potential reasonable development potential, we adjusted that down a little bit.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and when I can look at a picture that tells me a whole lot more. I saw the narrative in the report that talked about between this street and this street and that street and that street, and, you know, okay, I understand that if I'm really familiar with Camarillo, but seeing the picture, I go, oh, yeah, that's what they're talking about, this one right here. I got it, I got it. Let's see. We didn't talk about this before, but I'm wondering, when you were talking about some of the additional funding programs for housing, if there's any attempt to look at veterans assistance programs. We have a lot of military veterans residing in the community, either retired, active duty, or otherwise, and I'm just curious if there's any reason to mention anything in here about that as a potential to help some families. I'm thinking specifically of the lower end of the pay scales, that they have a very, very difficult time finding affordable housing in the city of Camarillo. And, you know, we support 2 major bases in the area, and it's a real chronic problem. Often find families living together and a lot of other issues. And both the husband and wife both have good jobs, but it just isn't enough. So I don't know whether you want to have some words on that or not, or that's really...
I appreciate the comment, and we think it's a real practical concern. And what I would say is that all of our housing programs and policies are not discriminatory, and they're inclusive. And so it would include the opportunity for veterans and veterans' families. If they were in the income category and they met the criteria, then they could definitely take advantage of these programs.
Finally, and honestly, I'm almost done. There's a requirement to compare the programs and policies in the previous plan with what's being proposed, and kind of a snapshot and an evaluation of what was said before and what happened. I saw that in your report, but I'm wondering if you'd care to elaborate, or do you think what you have is sufficient or is more required?
I mean, I feel that it's sufficient. Looks like Joe maybe has some input.
We agree 100%. We think it's sufficient. We think that the city's done a great job.
Oh, well, yeah,
And
that's not my
implementing-
question. I just want to make sure that
Oh,
it's
yes.
clear that we're doing the comparison, because
Yes,
that's
we've-
one of the
We've done
requirements.
that, yeah, and we think that it's all applicable and
Right.
and based on good practice, best practice, yes.
Okay, good. Are there any other comments by the commission? Sorry to take up so much.
I just want to have a question for you as far as when your first one, when you were talking about, I got a little lost as you were talking about the program 3 with the accessory dwelling units, and then you were adding the different verbiage. So were you adding the verbiage that is from page 106 of 162 about accessory dwellings? And I don't know if that actually explains what you were trying to do, or if you were trying to take that verbiage and put it into the program wording.
No, I didn't think that it really addressed it. It came up first in the staff report on page 6, and then later on in the draft housing element.
Because on page 106 of 162, when they're talking about ADUs, it does say this development standards ensure neighborhood compatibility, do not present unreasonable contracts to the developments and such. So I don't know if we need it in the program wording when we have it there.
No, we appreciate that input, Commissioner Vandermeulen, and that's good to highlight that, yes. We feel the appropriate spot is on big page 105 of 162, and it goes on to big page 106 of 162. That's more the descriptive information on background of how we apply our review process for these types of housing units. But the actual program itself is supposed to be very straightforward, direct, and easily comprehended by HCD. And so we don't get into that level of detail with the commentary.
So we are going to have a
So-
couple of a sentence or two.
We do have that in the body of the housing element, yes, currently.
Which page?
So at
It's-
the very bottom, it says page 105 of 162.
105.
And then carried over in the first paragraph on page 106.
Yeah.
So I'll just read it too to help facilitate for the public. The sentence says, "The city's development standards for accessory dwelling units ensure neighborhood compatibility and do not present an unreasonable constraint to development." So that addresses it, and then it goes on in a little bit more detail and talks about how the standards must also be consistent with current state law,
Okay.
and that we accommodate accessory dwelling units essentially to be consistent with state law also. Thank you, Commissioner Vandermeulen.
You're welcome. And yeah, and that goes on, there's even a little bit more, but just a little brief part in the housing element on page 122. But it just talks about in accordance with state law, so. It was just covered in several different places. One of the things I found most interesting was just reading through the charts and finding out like what percentages are different ages, or what percentages are different types of construction, or what, just all the different amounts of information, statistics that are here. The variety is just very complete and very interesting to read and get all of that. So, like I say, a lot of what I have in here is just things that I've highlighted that were interesting to read and get that information. So I really appreciate all the detail in here. And then I just there was one that I brought up to David Moe today at the last minute. And do we need to fix this? This is on page 137 of 162. And I wasn't sure because I didn't see any other listing in this grid for ADUs and adopting and this. And I don't know if the 2018 is an incorrect date or if we just need to add more to allow for the update that came in effect on January 1 of 2020.
Yes, we'll need to update that.
Yeah, we'll need to update that. That was actually pulled from our previous HCD annual reports.
Okay.
And we just submitted that, so that report was just submitted to the state.
So it does need
So
to
it
be
will-
updated?
Yeah, it will be updated to
Okay.
include that one.
Yeah, I just reread page 106, and it's very general, and I guess I would like to see a little bit more specificity in talking about the actual density, the texture, character of the surrounding neighborhood, if that could be inserted in that top paragraph on page 106. Because it's very general as it sits now, and I just wanted to make it a little more specific.
We'll look at it.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
We'll look at it. We need to balance what the wording is and trying to determine whether or not it would be considered a constraint to housing development of ADUs also, and we don't want to create a scenario where then it gets stricken by HCD, but we will look at it and we'll see. I think Kane and I and David Moe can try to enhance the compatibility to also
Yeah.
look at the neighborhood texture, as you referenced, Chairman Talmadge.
Yeah,
And
I
do-
just,
So just
right
kind
now,
of-
it's very open, and I just wanted to tighten it up a little bit.
Yeah, so we will, but we also have to remember that this is heavily restricted or regulated by state law, and we have to be consistent with state law.
Oh,
Yeah.
no question about that.
So, and,
But I don't think anything I said is in conflict with state law.
well, you did mention density, and every single legal lot in the city of Camarillo can have an ADU.
Yeah, true.
So that, so the density comment, so just kind of, there are some things that you said that probably would be inconsistent with state law, but we'll double check that
Okay.
and enhance that paragraph.
Okay, so you'll take a look at it?
Yep.
All right. Are there any other comments? This is a public hearing, so I declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak on this item? I have no speaker cards. Seeing none, public hearing is hereby closed. Now we have commissioner discussion. Any discussion by the members of the planning commission on the item?
I was just amazed at all the information I was reading on it, so it's I felt very complete. I have a lot highlighted that I caught my eye on such, but I didn't see too many, I only found a couple things where I felt they needed to be changed or corrected, so I know I didn't read every word of it, but I did get through it, so I just appreciate all the information that's in there.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yes, I'd just like to echo what Commissioner Vandermeulen said, not just now, but earlier as well. It's amazing reading through this very comprehensive document, how many ways you can break down the data to make your best effort to look at all the different things that involve fair housing and a comprehensive housing element. I think it's a job well done, and I could certainly support it. Thanks.
Commissioner Edsel?
Yeah, I thought it was a fine document as well, and I thought, especially your comments, were spotting things that I didn't even see some comments that'll help improve the document as well by the time it goes. So I feel comfortable that we can recommend sending this on to the city council.
I have a general question. How will the comments we made be forwarded to the council so they understand the questions that we may have raised or what you're going to look at? If we pass a recommendation on, what goes along with that?
So we'll go ahead and incorporate your comments into the document, and forward that on to the city council with your recommendation with the revised wording.
Okay,
And
so,
we'll outline in the agenda report to the city council, the notes David Moe took will summarize what the comments were
okay,
from the commission and make the edits and updates for the numbers, for instance, and we'll highlight that in the agenda report.
okay. So they will get a flavor of the nature of our questions. and
Absolutely,
comments.
yes.
Good, good. Well, I also agree that despite all my picayune questions, whatever you want to call them, I think it's an excellent document. Housing elements are really, really difficult to deal with because everybody lives in a house, and it's very easy to take the whole thing very personal of, hey, this is my house they're talking about. And I think it's important that the housing element, this is probably one of the primary drivers of what happens in the city. And because we don't have a commercial development plan, we don't have an industrial development plan, but we have a housing plan. So having a good housing element to the general plan, I think is of utmost importance. And I applaud the efforts of the consultant team in putting together, I think, a fine document. And I'm very supportive of the document. Notwithstanding my comments, I did read it. Anyway. So we have before us any other comments by the commission? All right. We've had discussion. We had a presentation. We had a public hearing. No one commented. We've had a good commission discussion. And I would entertain a recommendation to receive the draft housing elements and recommend forwarding to the city council and direct staff to submit the draft to Housing and Community Development for the state of California. Is there a motion to that extent?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Well, time to vote. Motion carries unanimously. So, thank you very much. So that finishes item 7. Item 8 is the director's report. Do you have a report, Mr. Vaca?
I don't have a report other than that we don't anticipate having a meeting on May 18th.
No meeting on 5/18?
No.
Okay.
So we believe our first meeting back, potentially with the planning commission, would be June 1st. And then I don't have any additional information tonight.
What about June? Do you know that yet?
Yeah, we would anticipate the first meeting in June, June 1st, that we may have a meeting. And
Yes.
we'll give you additional details as we get closer to that.
And that's June, I'm sorry, the date?
First?
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 And what about the 15th?
To be determined,
TBD.
yes.
TBD 6/15, okay? Anything else?
No, that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Great. Well, I thank you all very much. I thank the public, those few that were here, for being here, and those that participated either by email, letter, or otherwise on our agenda items. And a huge vote of thanks to staff for a lot of hard work on especially the housing element. That's been a long, long time process. Been working at it for, well, years, I guess. And to the consultant team working on that. And of course, the other agenda items. Thank you for your report and your work on that. And I want to extend thanks to my fellow commissioners for hanging in there and putting up with our Zoom calls. And it's so exciting to be back in person and see people again. It's really wonderful. So our next meeting will be June 1st. No meeting on May 18th. And is there any other comment from anyone?
I just echo that it's good to be back
Yes,
with everybody.
It is.
sure is.
Same here.
But thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.